This is the Highly Sensitive Person Podcast, a weekly podcast for people who experience the world brighter, louder, and more intensely. Join me on a journey of acceptance of our highly sensitive person traits. Welcome to episode 35. I'm your host, Kelly. This is a show about people with sensory processing sensitivity. We are conscientious and perceptive to the details of the world around us. Thanks for tuning in. I'd like to kick off today's episode with an email from a male listener in his mid-20s. He writes, I'd like to give a shout out for your blog and podcast. I'm always looking for new podcasts, and when I saw Highly Sensitive, I thought, oh great, a whole show about these easily offended crybabies. However, since I, quote, care so deeply about everything, I decided to download it anyway, and I am extremely glad I did. You have helped me understand myself so much better. Thank you so much for that email. The goal of this show and my blog at highlysensitiveperson.net is to do exactly that, to help other people learn about high sensitivity and accept themselves, the same way I learned about it and better accepted myself. And I felt the same way too when I first heard of highly sensitive people, that it was a bunch of easily offended crybabies, and now I know that's not the case. Today's episode is about jokes and how we HSPs can be sensitive to jokes or pranks that hurt people. It's frequently debated in pop culture whether certain controversial topics are okay to joke about. Examples of these cringy topics are pedophilia, rape, racial violence, stuff like that. Recently, Saturday Night Live did a sketch where they made jokes about the terrorist group ISIS. And some people were angry about this. They said it was something that you shouldn't joke about, while other people thought it was funny. So, which topics are off limits to joke about? We could debate that forever. But isn't comedy about pushing boundaries? It's all just words, isn't it? But everyone has different boundaries, so we'll never agree on what is off limits and what's not. But as you know, we HSPs are sensitive to the feelings of others, so likewise, we're probably more aware of jokes that can hurt people. I thought about this topic for a while to try to figure out what types of jokes that I usually don't like or that bother me. And I came up with 3 types of jokes that I generally don't like. Number 1, jokes about people who died in a tragic, sad way. I always think that person who died is someone's parent, sibling, friend, or child. And then I think, how would you feel if someone made jokes about the death of your loved one? Someone out there right now is devastated about this death, and it's not okay to make fun of someone's intense emotional pain. That's why I don't like those types of jokes. The second category is pranks that cause people to feel seriously terrified until they realize that it wasn't real. There was a video going around a while back where a husband pretended to drop his baby from a stairway inside the house. It was a prank on his wife who didn't know what he was doing. But what I ask is, how is causing someone terror funny? Especially doing that to someone you love. I just think that's cruel. Another example is the other day I saw a video where an experienced stunt driver took driving lessons but pretended to not know how to drive. So this stunt driver took driving lessons with several different instructors, and this video was showing the reactions of the instructors. After a few minutes of this experienced driver pretending to drive really slow and act dumb like she didn't know how to drive, then she took off and started going crazy fast in these tight circles at top speed around a parking lot. One of the instructors screamed and covered her face and just looked so scared. I mean, these instructors were fearing that they might die. I don't think that's funny. If someone played one of these types of tricks on me, it would take a long time for me to recover. Just the amount of adrenaline and cortisol running through my body would wreck me for hours. The stress response would wear me out. It's cruel to do that to someone. Just why? Why put someone through that? The third category of jokes I don't like is sometimes jokes about mental health and suicide. I just think that anyone suffering from these things deserves compassion, not to be teased or made fun of. Now, these aren't hard and fast rules. Sometimes I find some of these things funny, sometimes not. That said, it's weird how there seems to be a time limit for death jokes. After an arbitrary amount of time, it becomes acceptable to joke about death, Like if someone made a joke about people dying of the plague in the Middle Ages or whatever, no one would be offended. But if it was a joke about people dying from like a recent outbreak, it might not be okay. There are lots of caveats to this humor stuff, but I digress. I've heard some HSPs say they've been described by other people as being too serious. When I was a kid, I remember my dad telling me sometimes, "Lighten up." And that made me so angry. Don't tell me how to react to things. Listeners, what I want to tell you today is this. If you're one of the people who is sensitive to hurtful comedy, that's okay. You don't have to lighten up. You're allowed to react however is natural for you. Now notice that I didn't use the phrase easily offended. I didn't say you are easily offended. That's because it sounds pejorative. Saying someone is easily offended is a judgment that means your reaction is wrong. Your sensitive reactions aren't wrong. They are you. I guess I'll give you one more example. Many years ago, my husband and I were big fans of the comedian Daniel Tosh. Now, I want to be clear, this was several years before he had his TV show and was a well-known name. His old stand-up routines were hilarious, and we loved him. But over the years, once he got his TV show, his persona was a snarky, superior, obnoxious character that I just got tired of. Anyway, a few years ago, Daniel Tosh ran into controversy because he told an offensive joke about rape. I read about this joke online and I felt strongly about it, and kind of right at that moment, I stopped liking him. He went from being one of my favorite comedians to someone I didn't care about anymore. I couldn't like someone who could say something so clueless and stupid even under the guise of comedy. It crossed my personal line. Now, some people are hearing this story and instantly thinking, lighten up, it's comedy. It's supposed to be a joke. Get over it. No, I don't have to get over it. And I know by telling stories like this that I'm painting myself as someone who is uptight and not cool. But that's why I have to talk about this. You can still love to laugh, love comedy, enjoy stand-up, and you can be funny, all while being sensitive and not wanting to truly hurt people or be cruel. And yes, that line, the line where jokes go too far, is impossible to determine, but it's okay to have that line. I think the most important thing is this for HSPs. It's more important to not hurt someone than it is to be funny. Thanks so much for tuning in to the show today. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode over at the show notes at highlysensitiveperson.net/episode 35. That's the numbers 35. There you can sign up for the weekly-ish newsletter where you'll get updates on all the latest HSP news, blog posts, and podcast episodes. Also, if you like this show, please leave a review on iTunes. I would be super, super grateful. Once again, thanks for tuning in and have a wonderful week.